My name is Daniel Hutchins. I'm 70 years old, and I've lived in these West Virginia mountains since 1969. Built my cabin with my own hands. Learned to live off the land. Became part of the forest in ways most people never will. And for the last 50 years, I've shared these mountains with something that shouldn't exist. A creature I call Sentinel. What the world calls Bigfoot. We had an agreement. Unspoken, but absolutely clear. Boundaries that neither of us crossed without respect. A peace that lasted 5 decades. Until July 2023, when my granddaughter and her college friends violated those boundaries. And Sentinel responded with an ambush that was terrifying, methodical, and ultimately merciful in ways that changed everything I thought I understood about intelligence, territory, and justice. This isn't a story about encountering Bigfoot. This is a confession about the price of disrespecting agreements you don't fully understand. About underestimating intelligence that operates by different rules than ours. About learning that mercy from something powerful is a gift, not a guarantee. And it's a warning. Because if you live near wild places, there are boundaries you can't see. Rules you don't know. And if you violate them, you better hope you've built up enough credit to survive the consequences. Before I tell you what happened, I need you to do something. Hit that like button. Subscribe to this channel. This isn't just a story for entertainment. This is a warning that needs to be heard. These creatures exist. They have territory. They have rules. And if you don't respect both, you'll face consequences that might not be as forgiving as what my family experienced. Please, listen to what I'm about to tell you. Let me take you back to 1973, when this all began. I was 20 years old, fresh out of military service, looking for a place where the world couldn't find me. I bought 40 acres of mountain land in Pocahontas County, West Virginia. Dense forest, steep ridges, a creek running through the middle, and not another human being for miles in any direction. I spent my first year building a cabin, learning the land, hunting and fishing, cutting firewood. Making a life that didn't need civilization. That first winter, I started noticing things. Tracks in the snow that were too big to be human, too human-shaped to be bear. Stick structures, teepees made of branches, arranged with obvious intention, appearing in places I'd walked just days before. And at night sounds. Deep, resonating vocalizations that would echo through the valleys. Not quite howls, not quite screams. Something else entirely. I wasn't scared. I was curious. And careful. The first time I saw him was March 1974. I was hunting deer on the eastern edge of my property, following a game trail along a steep ravine. I looked across to the opposite ridge, maybe 60 yards away, and there he was. 8 feet tall easily. Maybe taller. Covered in dark reddish-brown hair, longer on the shoulders and back. Massive build, shoulders that looked impossibly wide, arms that hung below where his knees should be. Standing, completely still, watching me. We looked at each other for maybe 30 seconds. I didn't raise my rifle. Didn't move. Just acknowledged him. Then he did something I'll never forget. He raised one massive fist and struck his chest once. Hard. The sound echoed through the ravine like a drum. A statement. A declaration. Then he pointed to the western side of the ravine. His side. Then pointed to the eastern side, my side. The message was crystal clear. This is mine. That is yours. And then he turned and disappeared into the forest. I understood. I'd just been given boundaries. For the next 50 years, I respected those boundaries absolutely. The eastern side of the ravine was mine, my cabin, my trails, my hunting grounds. The western side was his. I called it Sentinel's territory. It wasn't that I couldn't cross. Over the years, I did occasionally venture onto the western side, but always briefly, always respectfully, and always leaving an offering. Fruit from my garden. Smoked venison. Once, a wool blanket when I noticed signs that he might be dealing with unusually harsh weather. And he did the same. Sometimes I'd find evidence that he'd crossed onto my side, always at night, never when I was visible. And always he'd leave signs. Stacks of smooth river stones. Arrangements of pine cones. His way of saying, I was here, but I respected your space. We developed a protocol. Unspoken, but absolutely clear. East side of a ravine. Human territory. I could live, build, hunt there, without concern. West side. Sentinel's territory. I could visit briefly, with respect, but I wasn't welcome for extended stays. The ravine itself, neutral ground. We could both be there simultaneously, without conflict. For decades, the system worked perfectly. There were moments of interaction beyond just boundary maintenance. In the winter of 1989, I got sick. Pneumonia, bad enough that I could barely keep the fire going. I was delirious for 3 days. When I finally recovered enough to go outside, I found a massive pile of firewood stacked near my door. Not cut with a saw, broken by hand. Thick branches snapped cleanly, arranged neatly. Sentinel had helped me. Another time, in 2007, there was a forest fire moving through the area. I first knew about it when Sentinel appeared at the edge of my clearing in broad daylight, something he'd never done before. He was agitated, gesturing violently toward the west, then pointing at me and making shooing motions. Leave. Now. I grabbed essentials and evacuated. 2 hours later, the official evacuation order came through. He'd warned me before the authorities even knew the fire was coming my way. Mutual respect. Clear boundaries. Lasting peace. I was married briefly in the 80s. Divorced. But I have a daughter, Rachel, from that marriage. She grew up mostly in the city with her mother, visited occasionally, but never took to mountain life. Rachel had a daughter in 2004, Sophie, my granddaughter. Sophie was different. She loved the mountains. Started visiting regularly when she was 10. She'd hike with me, help with chores, sit on the porch for hours just watching the forest. And she listened to my stories about the guardian of the forest with fascination, not skepticism. I never showed her Sentinel, never took her to the Western Territory, but I taught her the rules. Respect the boundaries, honor the forest, understand that we share this land with something older and wiser than us. In July 2023, Sophie was 19, studying environmental science in college. She called and asked if she could bring some friends up for a camping trip. Get away from the city, experience real wilderness. I agreed, but I was clear, you can camp on the eastern side of the property. I'll show you exactly where. But you do not cross the ravine. You do not go west. Those boundaries exist for a reason. Understand. She promised she understood. Sophie arrived with 3 friends. 2 young men, Ethan, 20 years old, tall and confident in that way young men often are, and Marcus, 21, quieter, more thoughtful. And a young woman, Aisha, 19, Sophie's roommate. They were enthusiastic, carrying expensive camping gear and cameras, excited about experiencing authentic wilderness. I gave them the tour, showed them the approved camping area on the eastern side, maybe half a mile from my cabin, pointed out the ravine, explained very clearly that the western side was off limits. Is this because of your Bigfoot? Ethan asked with a grin that made it clear he thought it was charming folklore. It's because those are the rules, I said firmly. Respect them. Sophie vouched for the seriousness, and they assured me they'd follow instructions. The first night passed without incident. They set up camp, built a fire, roasted hot dogs, told stories. I checked on them once around sunset, then returned to my cabin. Everything seemed fine. The second night, everything changed. At about 10 p.m., I heard screaming. Multiple voices, panicked, coming from the direction of their campsite. I grabbed my flashlight and my rifle not to shoot, but because you don't run toward unknown trouble in the mountains unarmed, and sprinted down the trail. I found chaos. The tent was partially collapsed. Gear was scattered everywhere. All 4 of them were huddled together near the remains of their fire. Sophie crying, Ethan pale and shaking, Marcus and Aisha clinging to each other. What happened? I shouted. Something surrounded us. Sophie gasped. Multiple things. Huge things. They were circling the tent, pounding the ground, making these sounds. God, Grandpa. The sounds. I swept my flashlight around the campsite, and my stomach dropped. Tracks, massive tracks in the soft earth. Multiple sets, at least 3 different individuals. And the location, Where exactly did you set up camp? I asked, though I was starting to realize the answer. Right where you showed us, Sophie insisted. But Ethan spoke up, his voice small. Actually, I convinced everyone to move the camp this afternoon. I thought the view would be better from the other clearing. The one past the creek, past the ravine. They'd camped on the western side, on Sentinel's territory. You crossed the boundary, I said quietly. I didn't think it mattered, Ethan said. I thought it was just. Get your essentials. Nothing else. We're going back to my cabin. Now, move quietly and quickly. They obeyed, too frightened to argue. As we walked single file back along the trail, I felt eyes on us. I looked back once. 3 shapes. Massive silhouettes against the moonlit trees, standing at the edge of the clearing we just left. Watching. Following at a distance. Not threatening directly, but making their presence unmistakably known. We made it to my cabin. I locked the doors, closed the shutters. The group was hysterical, talking over each other, demanding to call the police, asking what those things were. Those, I said, are the residents whose territory you invaded. They're warning us. If we respect that warning, we'll be safe. But we need to wait this out. Wait out what? Marcus asked. The lesson they're about to teach us. Midnight. The first incident. Pounding on the exterior walls of the cabin. Rhythmic, powerful, making the whole structure shake. It lasted exactly 5 minutes, then stopped. Silence. What are they doing? Aisha whispered. Demonstrating power, I said. Showing us what they're capable of. 1 a.m. Vocalizations. Screams that made the windows vibrate. Deep, resonating howls that seemed to come from multiple directions simultaneously. Sounds that triggered something primal in the brain, that made your body want to run even when your mind knew you had nowhere to go. It lasted 10 minutes. Then silence again. 2 a.m. Something different. I heard sounds on the porch. Movement. Weight on the wooden boards. Then nothing. I waited 5 minutes, then cautiously opened the door a crack. All of their camping gear, the tent, sleeping bags, backpacks, everything they'd left at the violated campsite, was stacked neatly on my porch. Not thrown. Not damaged. Carefully arranged and returned. The message was clear. Take your things and leave my territory. I brought the gear inside. The group stared at it in disbelief. How did they? Sophie started. They're intelligent, I said. More intelligent than we give them credit for. This is communication. Sophisticated communication. 3 a.m. The final message. A single knock on the front door. Heavy. Authoritative. Unmistakable. Don't open it, Ethan begged. I have to, I said. This is for me. Against all their protests, I opened the door. Sentinel stood on my porch. 10 feet away, fully visible in the lamplight. He was bigger than I remembered. 8.5 feet, maybe more. Shoulders that seemed impossibly broad. His face, weathered, scarred, ancient, carried an expression that was simultaneously furious and controlled. He looked at me. Really looked at me. 50 years of accumulated understanding passed between us in that moment. Then he pointed at the group huddled behind me. Then pointed west. Then drew his hand across his throat, a universal gesture. Death. That's what they deserved for the violation. But then he pointed east, and opened his palm, made a welcoming gesture. Acceptance. Forgiveness. The message couldn't have been clearer. They violated the most fundamental rule. That's a killing offense. But because of you, because of 50 years of respect between us, I'm allowing them to live. This once. But never again. Next violation will not be forgiven. I nodded slowly. I understand. Thank you. Sentinel held my gaze for 5 more seconds. Establishing dominance. Making absolutely certain the message was received and understood. Then he turned unhurried, dignified, and walked off the porch, disappearing into the forest. I closed the door, locked it, turned to face the group. What just happened? Sophie whispered. We just received mercy, I said. And we're never going to need it again, because none of you are ever going to violate those boundaries again. Understood? They all nodded, too shaken to speak. I want to stop here and ask you something. If you'd established boundaries with something powerful for decades and someone violated them, what would you expect to happen? Drop your answer in the comments. Because what Sentinel did, the restraint he showed, the proportional response, the mercy based on accumulated respect, that tells us something profound about the kind of intelligence we're dealing with. At dawn, I drove them all back to town. Sophie was traumatized but grateful. Ethan was completely silenced, all his cocky confidence erased by raw terror. Aisha and Marcus never came back to the mountains again. Sophie has visited since, but with profound respect for the rules. She understands now that those boundaries aren't folklore. They're real, enforced, and non-negotiable. I carry guilt about what happened. I should have been more emphatic. Should have supervised them more closely. Should have anticipated that young, skeptical city kids wouldn't take an old man's warning seriously. But I also carry gratitude. Sentinel could have hurt them, could have killed them easily. Instead, he chose a measured response: terrify them, teach them, return their property, then make the terms crystal clear. That's not animal behavior. That's sophisticated justice. Proportional, contextual, based on history and relationship. After it was over, I went back to the violated campsite. Sentinel had left something new, a massive barrier of logs and stones across the trail leading west. A physical reminder: do not cross. I've respected that. When I occasionally visit the Western Territory, now rarely, and always with substantial offerings, I leave better gifts than before. Quality tools, warm clothing, once a good mirror, which I later found carefully placed among decorative stones, suggesting he appreciated it. Our relationship has changed. Not damaged, but redefined. There's more caution now, more awareness that peace requires constant vigilance, that one generation's respect can be threatened by a single moment of carelessness. But the agreement holds. 50 years and counting. Here's what that night taught me, what I need you to understand. Sentinel didn't attack out of mindless aggression. He responded to a territorial violation with precisely calibrated force. He demonstrated power without using it lethally. He distinguished between malicious disrespect and ignorant error. He factored in 50 years of peaceful coexistence when deciding his response. That's not animal behavior. That's justice. That's intelligence that rivals and maybe exceeds our own. These creatures, whatever they are, have systems. They have rules. They have territories. They have memory and judgment and mercy. And they will enforce their boundaries. I've lived 70 years, 50 of those years in these mountains, sharing space with something that science says doesn't exist. And what I've learned isn't about proving Bigfoot is real. It's about what happens when two intelligent species establish boundaries, build trust, and respect territory. Sentinel could have killed my granddaughter and her friends. He chose not to, not because he's harmless, but because respect has value. Because decades of correct behavior bought me a margin of error. But that margin is thin. One violation allowed, not two. The ambush was his way of teaching that lesson. I forgive once because of our history. There will be no second forgiveness. That's sophisticated morality. That's a justice system based on context, history, and proportional response. If you live near wild places, pay attention to the boundaries. Not all of them are marked with fences or signs. Some are established through silent agreement between consciousnesses. Some are enforced by beings you'll never see until you cross the line. And if you respect those boundaries, you'll find coexistence is possible, peaceful, even beneficial. But if you violate them intentionally or through ignorance, I hope you built up as much credit as I did over 50 years. Because without that, the ambush might end very differently. My name is Daniel Hutchins. I've seen Bigfoot since the 1970s. And when he ambushed my family for violating territory he'd claimed long before I arrived, he taught me that mercy from the powerful is earned through decades of respect. We received that mercy once. We won't need it again. Thank you for listening. Please like this video, subscribe, but more importantly, share it. Not as entertainment, but as a warning that needs to be heard. These creatures exist. They have territory. They have rules. They have the capacity for mercy and the capacity to withhold it. Respect both. Because next time, someone might not be as lucky as my family was.